The tale of Tricky Nick Trickadee and his faithful dog Lucretius. Tricky Nick Trickadee doesn't believe in God. He'd much rather be outside playing with his dog. Tricky Nick Trickadee likes to have fun. He ignores Christmas but drinks lots of rum. Tricky Nick Trickadee really loves animals and plants. He doesn't have dominion, nor do his uncles and his aunts. Tricky Nick Trickadee thinks the virgin birth's a spoof. He says to everyone, there's no proof. Tricky Nick Trickadee thinks Muhammad is a joke. He can't have been a prophet, just an ordinary bloke. Tricky Nick Trickadee is not waiting for heavenly reward. He'd rather enjoy life now and never be bored. Tricky Nick Trickadee likes to play tricks. He takes the baby Jesus and throws him in a ditch.
There shall in that time be rumours of things going astray. And there shall be a great confusion as to where things really are.
Tricky Nick Trickadee never prays at all. He knows it's superstition and no one's there to hear his call. Tricky Nick Trickadee likes packs of 3, but only when it's lollies, not the Holy Trinity. Tricky Nick Trickadee meditates under a tree, but not praying to Buddha because he ain't a deity. Tricky Nick Trickadee shuns all religious ritual. For him it's nonsensical, mystical and stupidly habitual. Tricky Nick Trickadee doesn't need 2 wives. Life's too short for controlling others' lives. Tricky Nick Trickadee doesn't discriminate on sex and colours. He thinks all the people of this world are his sisters and brothers. Tricky Nick Trickadee knows America is great, if only it could rid itself of prejudice and hate.
Ha ha ha!